My name's Jacky. My background is, I was born in Hong Kong. I immigrated to Canada when I was very young, and I pretty much grew up here. I did my university here, my PhD here, and then I went to Boston, Massachusetts for about 6, 7 years to do my fellowship. My PhD was really different than I think what some of these guys do here. My PhD is more on cell biology, cancer biology, and also in genetics. My postdoc actually was on zebrafish genetics,
On
quite
what?
zebrafish genetics.
Oh, zebrafish genetics.
Zebrafish genetics, yeah. So, certainly a little bit different than the structural biologists and the protein engineers that are, that I pretty much work with every single day. But I think it's one. I like to think that that's one of the reasons why Dev brought me on board because it's, I bring a unique, maybe perhaps skill set to the table that, he doesn't really, see with his team. A kind of a unique perspective. I see things from a biology first perspective, and I think most people on his team would see things from a engineering protein perspective, right? So at least that's what I tell myself. Whether or not it's true, you gotta ask him. In late 2018, pretty much start of 2019, and never really had any desire to move to the States. So, I was excited for the opportunity to return, and really excited to be part of this. It's pretty much a global wave of biotech and therapeutics development, right? That's really taken over in the past maybe 10 years now. When I was doing my PhD, it was nobody. It was a much smaller community. This whole biotech concept or idea is really restricted towards maybe California and small niches in Boston. That's about it. But I'm excited to. That was one of the things that drew me to Dev's team. To be part of that innovative culture, right, in that community. So it's been maybe about 7 years now, actually, and working with Dev in various protein engineering projects as we try to commercialize what we find, and to really make an impact on the world and to patients. I was nearing the end of my fellowship in Boston, and I was looking for job opportunities, and unfortunately at the time my mentor had passed away very suddenly, it was an interesting experience because I really had to consider whether or not I wanted to stay in the States or come back to Canada, I finished off a lot of the projects that he had going, and I was talking to just actually some VCs, all over the place, some in Canada, and they knew of Dev's work, and they knew of his efforts to really create a biotech infrastructure here in Toronto and here in Canada, and they suggested that I reach out to him if I was interested in early stage startups, and both the good and the bad of it, the excitement and the emotional ups and downs of it. And ultimately, I was like, all right, I'll see what this is like. It's certainly very different with early stage as opposed to more established companies, whether it's kind of big pharma, like Novartis or stuff like that. I've enjoyed it, and yeah. So that's how I really got started with Dev, and I'd really heard about his work. It takes a certain person to be okay with early stage startups. As opposed to working for a big company and the bureaucracy that comes with that, right? We try to do what it takes to get us to the next level, which is, to raise the necessary funds to continue our work, to continue our research. I think it takes a certain mindset to do that, not be constrained by a certain set of duties or a certain job description, and to be driven enough to keep pushing forward regardless of what the job is, what the task is, right? So, I guess very broadly, if I was to describe what I do, I principally am involved in managing programs that have reached a certain level of biological and functional testing. So when it comes to engineering, I would leave that more to definitely Levi and Shane. And certainly protein production and antibody production is definitely up to Shane. He manages that team. But anything to do with biological validation, functional validation, and even when we get into manufacturing, if we have certain programs that get to that point, that's where I would take over and manage those partnerships, collaborations, and relationships with other outside companies. I can only tell you from my perspective. I think the answer to that question varies. When is a good time to engage other individuals or other parties? Anywhere between never and as early as possible, I guess. Well, I hate to say this, but this is where we make a living, right? In between those two extremes, right? And money comes into it, leverage comes into it. It's a lot of it is a business decision more than a science decision, right? And those two need to agree, and they need to come together at a point that we're happy with. And for some programs, maybe that's really early on, and for other programs, that's much later on, right? Competition is a big one. How fast do we want to go, and how slow do we want to go? Do we find the right partner that will strategically match what we want to achieve, right? So these are all important decisions, and for everything that we do, the answer is different. So it's very hard to come up with a defined set of criteria. And like I said, I guess the best way I put it is, that's where we make our money in between the two extremes. Never and as soon as possible. Today I was putting together a proposal to forward to our business team, trying to get a little bit of a new program, more of a kind of an extension of an existing program. I don't know how you would call it. What's the difference between a new program and an extension of an existing program? But hopefully we can refine some of the business development strategies, and if the science looks good and the market is there, then we will go down the road to, at least for us, doing the science side, and the business team will begin to really look at what's putting together a plan in place, as in terms of when do we engage partners, when's a good opportunity within that field to do that, and plot a course that hopefully will get us to the market as soon as possible, right? So yeah, that's what I was doing principally. Also dealing with some HR issues. We're thinking of expanding the team and hiring new members. Some discussions along that front, both internally and also with the candidate, to find a mutually agreeable business arrangement, employment arrangement that we're happy with and they're happy with, and hopefully we can further expand on what we do. He does a lot of the engineering as well, very similar to Levi, and I think the added duties that he has is that he is managing a team as well that actually makes the proteins, that does a lot of the QC work, QC experiments for the proteins that they make.
What's QC?
Quality control. Quality control, validation work, to make sure that the proteins that his team is making is really up to par with what we want to take to functional testing, such as what I typically manage. And we do have a separate team of cell biologists or functional biologists that take over once the proteins are made. So he kind of manages really the start of the pipeline, as we would like to think of it. And the pipeline only works when Jay's there, pushing it through, right? So he's really an integral part of what we do out in California. It's the weather, but sorry. I guess it's the weather, but yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, but you're right. It's still a hub for biotech, right? out in California. There are a lot of great schools, a lot of kids that graduate and are very driven towards making an impact in biotech and making drugs, and it's hard to get away from that. I think it's a similar thing compared to Boston, for example, but Boston's colder, so it maybe has a bit of a drawback in that sense, but I think the connections between academic institutions and innovation companies will always be there. It's an HR pipeline. It's a product pipeline. Very difficult to get away from. So that's why he's down in California. Yeah.